By the following day, Mo-Fei began wondering how she would make enough money for their trip to the island. The guildmaster thought her trip was a trap and warned her to stay away from Anyu, but she was already lost in the realms of love, and her mind was made up. As she met him that evening, she revealed that she had bought 2 tickets for their ship and could not wait to get out of this hellhole, so he told her to wait for him at the tower. The next day, Mo-Fei slayed another thief, taking it for her final kill, and after returning home, she closed her box and began to leave. In the street, she came across 2 dudes who began teasing her about her trip. However, when they realized she could end them instantly, they started begging for her forgiveness. Luckily, Mo-Fei was in a good mood today and decided to leave. After arriving at the tower, Mo-Fei was excited about leaving the city, but Yuan wondered why Anyu had told her to wait for him here. He had a bad feeling about this and thought this must be the reason why Mo-Fei became an angry fairy. When it was afternoon, Mo-Fei realized that Anyu was still not there, but thought he was delayed by traffic or something, and decided to keep on waiting. Yuan wondered what Anyu's plan was, and thought he was definitely hatching something evil. By the 3rd night, Mo-Fei remained on the tower, determined to wait for her Prince Charming. She had dreamt of this moment for weeks, and thought he may arrive as soon as she leaves. However, Yuan knew better, and began screaming at her to return to her senses, but there was no use. When it was morning, the guildmaster revealed that their town had been invaded by bandits in her absence, and that no one could escape to the city. Even so, Mo-Fei told him that she wouldn't leave until seeing the love of her life. Just then, the bandits blew up the tower, and as Mo-Fei regained consciousness, she thought her man must have been captured, and hurried to save him. As she ran down the steps, she began hearing his voice inside her head, and was sad that they wouldn't make it to the island together. In an instant, she slayed 2 bandits, but as she arrived outside, the other bandits threatened to eliminate a girl. Angered by the sight, she rushed forward and slayed them all. As she tried calming the girl, she stabbed her with a knife, and Mo-Fei realized she was one of them. At that moment, Anyu appeared before her eyes, and the girl told him that Mo-Fei was more gullible than a chicken. Her words were cold, and Mo-Fei realized that she was a useless, ugly loser after all. Desperate to reach him, she began crawling towards the men. But one bandit told her that her lover had suggested the plan himself. A few weeks ago, he had told the bandits that he would capture her, and in return demanded to be in charge of the Eastern District. For his plan to succeed, he had requested for a mere sword, and was convinced that it was all he needed. At this realization, Mo-Fei began walking towards them, determined to come face to face with Anyu, and ignoring Yuan's screams since she could not hear him anyway. However, she was soon forced to her knees, and the lead bandit told Anyu that he has no intentions of letting her live. As Mo-Fei remembered their moments together, and that it was all a trick, she screamed like she had lost her mind. At the same time, the bandits started vanishing, and the others ran away as a group of fairies destroyed the town. With the town in flames, Anyu invited Mo-Fei for a conversation. Angered by his ugly, disgusting face, she began charging at him with her sword, but a fairy blocked her attack, and Anyu told her that he was unkillable. Even so, Mo-Fei wouldn't quit and began attacking the fairy, but she blocked everything. As she grew angrier, she struck with all her strength, but her sword broke in half, and she collapsed from her injury. Anyu thought she was tough and offered to help her live, so he caused a flower to begin glowing, and told her to become a fairy in return for her revenge. He told her that he travels across the world in search of worthy women to transform into a fairy, and said that she could only become one if she was willing to. Driven by anger and hate, Mo-Fei agreed to become a fairy, saying that she would return to eliminate him even in a reincarnated world. He told her that the flower was called Another Shore, and that they would meet again in a reincarnated world. At that instant, large vines bound her, and Yuan tried punching Anyu for being a jackass, but went through him and fell to the ground. When he demanded to know why he was hurting her, Anyu told him that she was only an NPC, and was trying to help her evolve. As they appeared inside a void, he told him that they were the same soul, and that they have the same dream of conquering the world. However, he considered this world a video game, and could care less about what happens here. Angered by his words, Yuan commanded him to free Mo-Fei, but Anyu vanished, and told him that he was too weak and useless to do anything. When Yuan wondered where he vanished to, the leprechaun told him that he was only talking to his soul fragments that was left in this world, and revealed that the vines was the seal trapping Mo-Fei. Desperate to save her, Yuan punched the vine, but realized that it was useless, and thought he could free her by offing himself. After all, her seal had opened only because the vampire killed him. The leprechaun thought it was a terrible idea, and told him that his spirit had built this world, and that it was powered by his spiritual strength. Without this power, he would never wake up, she said, but he told her that his life was irrelevant, but realized that he was too chicken to finish the job. Just then, the ground began trembling, and they realized that this world would soon vanish. At that moment, Yuan became determined again, thinking it was the only way to save Mo Fei, and began climbing up the vines. When he was high enough, he began telling Mo Fei that she was the love of his life, and has decided to abandon his desire of having a harem just so he can have her. As he gave her a goodbye kiss, he promised to return, and threw himself off to the ground. At that moment, Mo Fei began to remember him in her memories, and how he had tried to warn her about NU. Just then, she woke up, and as she began freeing herself, the vines vanished instantly. When she appeared before him, she pulled out the sword and hurled it away. But as soon as she realized he was dead, she began to cry, wondering why he had chosen to remain a simp and isekai'd himself for her. She was sad to see him dead, having realized that he wasn't the same person that tricked her, so she wished to see him again, and said that she wants to stay by his side for the rest of her life. However, she had no powers to reawaken him, and realized that she would be lonely forever. Deciding to hug the ground, she began to leave, but Yuan regained consciousness and held her ankle. He wasn't certain how he returned to life, but told her that her funeral speech was touching. However, she grew angry, realizing how disgusting his face was, and summoned her sword to isekai his ass for good. Afraid for himself, he started begging for her forgiveness, saying that he managed to enter her spirit world using the princess's spirit energy so that he would save her. He had been the ultimate simp by deciding to hug the ground without even being sure he would return to life. So when she realized his life was too useless to even take away, she decided to spare him. To utilize his chance, Yuan suggested that they combine their spirits to defeat their enemy, so she held his hand and said that they were partners for life. At that moment, he returned to the original world, and the princess fell from exhaustion, as she had grown hungry for some instant noodles. But he laid her on the ground. Ready to take charge as a man, he told Mo Fei to join with his spirit. As she vanished, a light overwhelmed him as her spirit entered his body, and at that instant, thick roots began curling around him with a powerful energy, turning him into a god. Thinking he could eliminate him, the vampire knight flew at him, but Yuan knocked him to the ground and flew in for the killer blow. As he missed, he dug into the ground and summoned large roots to attack him, but the vampire destroyed them, and they began a relentless unending battle until Yuan kicked him towards the sky. As the knight cast a flame, Yuan cancelled it, and they clashed in the clouds before Yuan smacked him to the ground. Desperate for payback, the vampire took off to the sky, looking to slay Yuan, but he knocked him with a fiery punch that broke his sword, and sent him crashing to the ground with a powerful explosion. As Yuan observed the sight of the explosion, he thought the vampire should be blown up into a million pieces, but Mo Fei told him that he was still alive. Yuan thought he could utilize this chance, so he tried persuading Mo Fei to travel the world with him, saying that their new experience together would change her spirit world. However, when he began wondering if her horns were made of wood, she grew angry and knocked his ass flat. The leprechaun told him that his brain was as useless as his face, as he was never meant to touch a fairy's horns. Just then, the chairwoman appeared before them, and gave Yuan 2 fairy seeds for eliminating the vampires, saying that it was a pleasure doing business with him. However, Yuan thought she was too creepy, and hurried away with Mo Fei. The next day at school, as Yuan laid asleep, exhausted from the previous night, the teacher welcomed the Princess Anqi and Mo Fei to the class as the new transfer students. And as Mo Fei introduced herself to everyone, all the boys thought she looked like an angel. When Yuan noticed them, he wondered why they enrolled at the school, but the boys thought he shouldn't have woken up from his nap. Anqi began saying that she had a great time last night, and had barely gotten enough sleep from all the activity. And Mo Fei said that she was still sore all over the body. Anqi thought Yuan should last longer next time, and suggested that they play together on another night. When Mo Fei agreed, all the boys wondered how Yuan managed to have a threesome with 2 hot girls. After escaping, Yuan decided to visit the library, hoping to learn new magic. Inside, the librarian demanded to know why he came, so he told her that he wants magic books that would reveal how to unlock the magic of plant seeds. So to help him, she summoned a few scrolls, saying that he can only learn 2 of the scrolls at his current magic level, since he was far too weak and useless to go any further. That evening, Yuan arrived at a lake, and was happy that he would finally awaken the fairy seed. However, the leprechaun told him that his plant magic would have no power on the fairy seed, and Yuan thought his dreams of awakening more fairies were over. As he wondered why she had not revealed this earlier, she said that she intentionally allowed him to acquire the Encyclopedia of Plants, only for him to awaken the ability to assess the fairy seeds. Before his eyes, she consumed the encyclopedia and upgraded instantly. As she raised the seeds, the instructions for breaking their seal appeared before Yuan. But he thought the instructions were poetry, and decided to cast magic seeds into the lake. At once, plants sprouted out of the water and blossomed into beautiful flowers. Before long, the entire lake was covered with flowers, so Yuan threw one fairy seed inside the water and decided to wait for it to sprout. However, when it was morning, he realized that it didn't grow, and by evening, he began to wonder if it was ever going to bloom. At the same time, in a far city, the vampire knight arrived at his lord's castle, having survived Yuan's inferno. As he apologized for failing to capture the princess, the lord said that he was becoming useless, and told him that capturing Mo Fei was the only way to make amends. He said that he desires to conquer the world with the power of a fairy, and was determined to do so at whatever cost. However, the knight thought it was impossible, and told him that Mo Fei already has a master, but the lord couldn't care less, and told him to eliminate Yuan immediately. At the lake, Yuan noticed a light glowing underwater, and thought the fiery sea was finally coming to life. Before his eyes, dews began rising from the plants, and a new plant started forming inside a mystical light. When it was done, the petals opened, revealing a young fairy inside. It had taken a week for the flower to sprout, and Yuan was happy to finally achieve this success. But Mo Fei told him that the fairy was messed up in the head. Just then, the fairy thought Yuan was a fake for failing to awaken the other fairy seed, and threatened to eliminate him. As she flew to end him, Mo Fei drew her sword to protect her man. Before their eyes, a mystical light appeared on the other side of the forest, and as the clouds covered the moon, a plant began to sprout with all its flowers. At that moment, the beautiful petals opened, and a fairy appeared before them. Yuan thought she was beautiful, and soon realized that the fairies were sisters. After spotting Yuan, one fairy, Yuexian, decided to thank him for awakening them, and called him her master. Together, they decided to ask him if he was willing to add them to his harem. But even the mere thought of it gave Yuan a nosebleed. When he realized that Mo Fei was close to sending him to the afterlife, he decided to cast a spell, drawing them into his magical device to seal their contract as their master forever. Mo Fei thought he was a greedy perv for desiring to increase his harem, but Yuan told her that he only wants to set the fairies free so they can choose their own future. The next day at the chairwoman's office, she told Yuan that the vampire knight was leading the Orphe army to eliminate him and capture the princess. The lady thought his presence at the school would put everyone in danger, so she commanded him to leave immediately, and to take the princess with him. That day, as he was ready to leave, the librarian appeared before him, and asked him to help her gather magical scrolls in every island they visit, so that the library would remain equipped with magic. So she gave him a crystal terminal, saying that it would offer him a reward every time he found a new magic, and thought it would be useful. Inside the forest, Yuan told the leprechaun to consume the crystal terminal so she would evolve once more. He thought they would be attacked soon, but hoped they would become stronger first. Realizing the other fairies had gone out of sight, he wondered where they were, so Anqui told him that they had headed to the lake. Thinking he would get to swim, Yuan began hurrying to the lake, and Anqui thought she would catch some crabs. However, a dragon appeared before their eyes, and Yuan realized that his plans were screwed. As it spewed a flame to obliterate him, Yuan blocked it with a mental barrier. The dragon began calling him a worthless, ugly bonehead, and wondered why he wasn't dead already so it could win over the fairies to its side. The second fairy, Lin, offered to take on the dragon for disturbing their peace, but Yuan decided to fight it instead. When the dragon threatened to destroy him in an instant, Yuan said they already eliminated a level 8 vampire, and were certain that it couldn't be half as powerful. Hearing those words, the dragon thought it was surely screwed, since it was only a level 3 dragon. However, when Yuan challenged him to a duel, it immediately accepted his challenge. As Yuan arrived inside the water, he cast vines to capture the dragon, and began to pull it towards the lake to stop it from using its fire ability. Because of that, the dragon decided to surrender, and threw down a flute so he could summon it whenever he was in trouble. After arriving at a resort, Yuan requested for 2 single rooms for the night, but the hotel receptionist wondered how he was going to develop plot in 2 separate rooms. That night, when Yuan met Lin, he began asking if she was sick, but she told him to get his ugly ass face out of her sight, as she had grown sick of his shit face already and couldn't wait to tear him apart. However, since Yuexian had decided to stay with him, she said that she would also remain with him in the meantime. Yuan thought this was good news, but wondered why she hates him, so she told him that his useless face was enough to make her vomit. She said that she had woken up without the memories of her past, but was happy to have her sister by her side. Yuan thought she has amnesia, and told her that staying in the resort for a few more days would help her regain her memories. At that moment, her memories began to return, and she was angry to remember them. She thought Yuan was responsible, and began to blame him for being too useless and for digging his nose into her business. As she tried to hit him, a spell electrocuted her for attacking her master. At that moment, 3 mysterious dudes appeared before them, saying that they came to eliminate him. Using mental communication, Yuan told Mo Fei that his ass was in trouble, so she hurried off with Yuexian. Yuan thought they were from the Orphi Empire and pulled the whistle to summon the dragon. At once, it arrived, and Yuan told it to obliterate the men. However, when it realized they came to capture the fairies, the dragon switched sides and offered to help the men kill Yuan instead, thinking it would finally claim a fairy. Just then, the men charged at them, so Mo Fei told Yuan to beat the dragon, and the fairies headed off to battle. As Mo Fei slashed several arrows, Lin kicked an enemy, and Yuexian dodged another. When the dragon threatened to chew Yuan's bones, he began running off, but as he tried capturing the monster, it evaded the vines and spewed fire that knocked him into the water. As the dragon flew at him, Yuan tried capturing it once more, but it burned up the vines. At the same time, Mo Fei retreated to the other fairies and wondered if Yuan wants her help, but he told her that he was an incoming hero and managed to capture the dragon inside large petals. Before he knew it, a seal appeared deep in the lake and began drawing him inside. Mo Fei noticed the mystical light before her and dived into the water to save Yuan. However, Lin thought this was their opportunity to escape and told Yuexian to run away with her. One dude thought he could utilize their distraction, but Yuexian blocked his arrows, and as her shield broke, a shard scratched her arm. This made Lin angry, and her shield repelled the men instantly. At the same time, Mo Fei realized that Yuan had vanished, so she returned to the bridge, looking to put an end to the fight.